What if the most dangerous war of the 21st century doesn't start with an invasion, but with a countdown, a date already marked, a deadline whispered in military briefings, 2027. Not speculation, a strategic forecast. And if it happens, the world's most powerful economies could fall over a single island the size of Switzerland. Across classified meetings and war simulations, one warning keeps resurfacing. The clock is ticking towards conflict in the Pacific. For decades, Taiwan has lived in the shadow of Beijing's growing ambition. But now, something has shifted. US intelligence, defense analysts, and Pentagon officials are aligning around a single date, 2027, as the point of no return. Why that year? It's not random, it's strategic. By then, China is expected to complete a historic military modernization. Taiwan will hold critical elections, and the global semiconductor industry will be more fragile and more valuable than ever before. Control of supply chains, global tech, and the balance of power between democracy and authoritarianism. In this investigation, we'll uncover why Washington believes an invasion is closer than ever. We'll follow the money behind Taiwan's chip empire, track the silent buildup in the South China Sea, and expose the billion-dollar bets being placed on war or peace. Stay with us, because by the end of this documentary, you'll see why 2027 might not just be a prediction, it might be a deadline. Welcome to Empire Secrets. It began as a quiet pattern. Brief mentions in think tank reports, offhand remarks from generals, and data points buried in classified assessments. But over time, the pieces began forming something far more chilling, a strategic timeline. 2027, not just a year, but a threshold. That year marks the end of a massive military overhaul by the People's Liberation Army, a deadline set by Xi Jinping himself. The goal? To transform China's armed forces into a fully modernized, combat-ready power capable of winning regional wars, especially one over Taiwan. Publicly, Chinese officials describe it as routine development, but privately, US analysts have noticed something different. The acceleration is surgical, focused on amphibious invasion capability, long-range missiles, and cyber warfare units. All things that wouldn't be necessary unless you were planning to seize an island under heavy resistance. In response, top Pentagon officials have made the 2027 scenario a central focus. Admiral Philip Davidson, the former head of US Indo-Pacific Command, made headlines when he said that he believes China could take military action against Taiwan within 6 years. That statement was made in 2021. The math is simple. That takes us straight to 2027. Since then, the war games have intensified. The US military has conducted multiple high-level simulations of a potential invasion. Some outcomes are catastrophic, showing massive losses on both sides and a global economic shock that could eclipse anything we've seen before. But here's the catch: none of this is guaranteed. China hasn't announced any invasion plans, and Beijing often insists that reunification with Taiwan should happen peacefully. But the scale and specificity of their military planning tells a different story, one that can't be ignored. US defense officials now speak less about if and more about when, and they're preparing accordingly. Billions are being redirected to fortify bases in Guam, the Philippines, and Australia. Warships are on standby. Pacific alliances are being restructured. Why? Because if an attack is launched, the first missiles could land in under 10 minutes. This is no longer a vague geopolitical risk. It's a scenario being written into real-world military policy, procurement, and foreign relations. And it all centers on a question no one has fully answered. Why is Taiwan so important that the world would risk everything to defend it? At first glance, Taiwan is a dot on the map, an island barely visible next to mainland China. But look closer and you'll see a $1 trillion engine beating at the heart of the global economy. not oil, not gold, semiconductors. These tiny chips, no larger than a fingernail, power everything from smartphones and laptops to fighter jets, nuclear command systems, and AI supercomputers. And the vast majority of the world's advanced chips come from just one place: Taiwan. At the center of it all is TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. This company doesn't just dominate the chip industry, it defines it. TSMC produces over 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors, using fabrication technologies so complex only a handful of firms on Earth even understand how it's done. For the US, Taiwan's chip supremacy has become both a blessing and a ticking time bomb. American tech giants, Apple, Nvidia, AMD, rely on TSMC to produce their most powerful processors. Even the Pentagon depends on Taiwan-made chips for its weapons systems. That means if Taiwan falls, America's tech edge could collapse overnight. This strategic vulnerability is what military experts now call the silicon shield. The idea is simple: Taiwan's semiconductor dominance is so essential to the global economy that no one, including China, would risk destroying it. But that theory is starting to crack, because China doesn't just want access to Taiwan's chips, it wants control over the entire supply chain. Beijing has spent the last decade pouring hundreds of billions into its own chip industry, trying to reduce dependence on Taiwan. But despite the money, China still lags years behind in advanced manufacturing. And every sanction from the US, from Huawei to AI chip bans, only widens the gap. That creates a dangerous incentive. If China believes it can't catch up peacefully, it may decide that taking Taiwan is the only way to secure its technological future. For Xi Jinping, this isn't just about nationalism, it's about survival. Whoever controls the chips controls the next century. And with Taiwan producing the most advanced chips on Earth, it has become the single most important island in the world. This is why American war planners are no longer focused on ideology. They're focused on logistics, supply chain vulnerabilities, production bottlenecks, infrastructure sabotage, and the real-world cost of losing access to TSMC overnight. Because in the event of war, the semiconductor shortage of 2021 would look like a hiccup. The entire global tech economy could seize up, from EVs to cloud servers, drones to medical equipment. And that's the terrifying paradox. Taiwan's greatest strength is also its greatest risk. The chips that protect it are the very thing that might make it a target. But how exactly would China strike? What would that invasion look like? And are they already laying the groundwork? Let's break that open in the next chapter. If China moves on Taiwan, it won't start with a dramatic amphibious landing on a crowded beach. It will begin in silence, in the sky, underwater, and deep inside digital systems. Beijing has been preparing this for years, not just building weapons, but refining a full-spectrum strategy designed to overwhelm Taiwan quickly, paralyze Western response, and reshape the balance of power in Asia before the world can react. This isn't speculation, it's detailed in hundreds of Chinese military publications, exercises, and state-funded simulations. The goal? A joint firepower strike that neutralizes Taiwan's defenses before they can even be activated. Step 1 would be a massive cyber and electronic warfare campaign. Internet outages, satellite blackouts, jamming of military GPS, and psychological disinformation meant to blind Taiwan's government, sow confusion, and isolate the island digitally before the first missile even hits. Step 2. Ballistic missile strikes on air bases, radar stations, and command bunkers. These wouldn't just aim to destroy hardware, they'd aim to shatter morale, sending a clear message: resistance is futile. Then come the naval blockades. China's navy, now the largest in the world, would move in to cut off Taiwan's ports, fuel supply, and access to global trade. Invasion may not even require full occupation, just isolation. But if ground forces are deployed, they'd likely focus on rapid seizure of key coastal cities and infrastructure, the presidential palace, TSMC headquarters, communication towers. The plan isn't total conquest, it's decapitation. Hit fast, control the narrative, present the world with a fait accompli. To prepare for this, China has been rehearsing constantly. Satellite images show massive mock-ups of Taiwanese government buildings in training zones. Military drills simulate urban assaults, port takeovers, and anti-ship missile strikes, all tailored to a Taiwan-shaped battlefield. And Beijing's ambitions are backed by numbers. Over 2 million active military personnel, more than 1,300 ballistic missiles, and hundreds of modern fighter jets and warships, many designed specifically for Taiwan's geography. But perhaps the most revealing signs lie in China's grey zone warfare. Daily incursions into Taiwan's air defense zone, economic pressure on companies that recognize Taiwanese sovereignty, political influence campaigns aimed at dividing Taiwanese society from within. It's not a sudden invasion Beijing wants, it's a slow suffocation, one where the West can react in time and Taiwan loses without a single shot fired. Yet for all its military planning, China still faces a colossal obstacle: the United States. Because if war breaks out in the Taiwan Strait, Washington won't be a spectator. In the next chapter, we'll uncover how America is quietly redrawing the map of the Pacific, and why that could be the only thing standing in China's way. The United States doesn't just see Taiwan as a partner, it sees it as a cornerstone, a fragile piece in a much larger strategic puzzle that stretches across the Pacific. And now Washington is reinforcing every tile in that puzzle with steel. For decades, America relied on what's called strategic ambiguity, a vague policy that neither promised to defend Taiwan nor ruled it out. But as China's threats become louder, Washington's silence began to harden into warning. And behind these scenes, a massive military repositioning began. Billions are now being spent on reinforcing Guam, Okinawa, and Hawaii. But more quietly, the Pentagon is reviving old alliances and forging new ones, building what some call a ring of deterrence around China. In the Philippines, after years of diplomatic cooling, the US secured access to 4 new military bases, some just 200 miles from Taiwan. In Australia, the AUKUS agreement opened the door to nuclear-powered submarines and intelligence sharing never seen before. Japan, traditionally pacifist since World War II, is now rearming at a pace that stunned its own population. In 2023, it approved the largest defense budget since the Cold War and signaled it would support US action if Taiwan is attacked. South Korea, India, Vietnam, Singapore all have seen a surge in diplomatic and military attention from Washington. These aren't formal pledges, but they are signals, and Beijing sees them loud and clear. The US has also restructured its military doctrine to adapt to the first island chain strategy, a network of islands stretching from Japan to the Philippines. In the event of a Chinese offensive, these islands become launch pads for aircraft, missile systems, and naval reinforcements, all aimed at locking China inside its own waters. It's a strategy of entrapment. If war erupts, China faces a wall of US power, naval, aerial, and cyber, backed by regional partners who increasingly view Beijing as a threat rather than a trade ally. But there's another layer, a hidden one. Silicon Valley and Washington are now aligning on defense tech like never before. AI startups, drone manufacturers, hypersonic labs, they're quietly receiving Pentagon contracts under the promise of national security innovation. Taiwan's fate isn't just a military matter, it's becoming a tech-industrial arms race. And yet, for all this preparation, there's a gnawing fear in Washington. It might not be enough. China's military might be untested, but its speed, cyber capability, and sheer volume of assets could overwhelm Taiwan before help arrives. The US might not be able to respond in time, or worse, it could be drawn into a war it can't win without nuclear escalation. That's why behind every base, every alliance, every statement, there's a question no general can fully answer. If China invades, will the US really risk World War III to stop it? And if not, what happens to the global economy, to markets, to energy, to tech, if Taiwan is cut off overnight? In the next chapter, we'll explore just that, the cost of losing Taiwan, not just militarily, but financially, because what's at stake isn't just territory, it's the foundation of the modern world. When most people think of war, they imagine soldiers, missiles, and borders. But in a conflict over Taiwan, the battlefield wouldn't just be military, it would be financial, and the consequences would ripple far beyond Asia. Taiwan isn't just another island, it's the beating heart of the world's tech economy. If China seized control, through force or blockade, the shockwaves would hit every major economy in a matter of days. Semiconductor shipments would stop. TSMC, responsible for the chips inside iPhones, Teslas, and Nvidia supercomputers, would either be disabled or nationalized. Western companies would scramble to find alternatives, but there are none. South Korea and the US combined don't match Taiwan's capacity. The result? A collapse in global tech production, from smartphones to medical devices to AI data centers. Within 72 hours, global supply chains would begin seizing. Automakers would halt all production. Cloud services would face outages. The stock market would plummet, triggered by panic selling of tech giants like Apple, Amazon, and Google. Analysts estimate that even a partial disruption of Taiwan's chip exports could cost the global economy $1 trillion in just the first few months. That's before you even factor in oil price spikes, trade reroutes, and capital flights from Asia. And it wouldn't stop at economics. A Chinese occupation of Taiwan would send a message louder than any bomb that the US can no longer guarantee stability in Asia. Allies like Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines would question their security pacts. India would reassess its defense posture, and China's influence would surge, not just militarily, but diplomatically and economically. The Chinese yuan could challenge the US dollar more aggressively in trade settlements. Nations across Africa and Latin America, already courted by Beijing, might shift further away from Western institutions. But perhaps most chilling, a successful takeover would validate the use of force as a path to economic supremacy in the 21st century. China wouldn't just win an island, it would reshape the world order. Western investors know this, defense budgets know this, even corporations know this. That's why you're now seeing tech giants lobbying for chip independence, governments pouring billions into domestic fabs, and militaries scrambling to prepare for what happens if the island goes dark. Because unlike past wars fought over land or ideology, this one is about infrastructure, the invisible circuits that hold modern life together. And if they fall into the wrong hands, it's not just Taiwan that loses, it's everyone. But why is this all converging now? Why is 2027 the moment of truth? To understand that, we have to look not at missiles, but at megatrends. The AI revolution, the aging of empires, the tipping points that make war less about desire and more about deadlines. Let's unpack that next. While tanks and warships dominate the headlines, the real conflict is being fought in code, chips, and cognitive warfare. It's not just about land, it's about who programs the next century. At the core of this struggle is artificial intelligence, the most valuable and contested tool of the 21st century. AI powers everything from automated weapons to stock market algorithms, and just like oil-powered empires in the last century, data and compute power will define the next one. And this is where Taiwan becomes even more critical. The world's most advanced AI chips, from Nvidia's H100 to Google's TPUs, are produced with extreme precision in TSMC's fabs in Taiwan. These chips aren't just products, they're weapons of innovation, enabling breakthroughs in surveillance, biotech, quantum computing, and defense automation. Now imagine if Beijing controlled that pipeline. China has long been playing catch-up in the AI race. US sanctions have cut off access to extreme ultraviolet lithography, restricted AI chip exports, and blacklisted Chinese firms like Huawei and SenseTime. In response, China has doubled down on domestic R&D. And it's not enough. They're still years behind. But if Taiwan were brought under Beijing's control, that gap could vanish overnight. With the fabs, expertise, and IP under Chinese jurisdiction, the West wouldn't just lose a supplier, it would lose its edge. China could flood global markets with cheaper AI chips, train military algorithms on unmatched compute power, export surveillance tech with no dependence on Silicon Valley. That's why tech leaders from Washington to Wall Street are sounding the alarm. Because this isn't just a geopolitical crisis, it's a technological power shift. The United States is already responding. Biden's CHIPS Act is investing $280 billion in domestic semiconductor manufacturing. Intel and Samsung are building fabs in Arizona and Texas. Europe is trying to do the same, but these are multi-year projects, and they won't be ready in time if war breaks out tomorrow. The urgency is driving a new doctrine: tech deterrence. The US isn't just preparing its military, it's preparing its digital infrastructure for resilience, backdoor protections, cloud decentralization, AI ethics regulations, and covert agreements between the Pentagon and private companies to prioritize national defense in case of a chip crisis. Meanwhile, China is investing in quantum communication, 5G surveillance grids, and state-run AI platforms to reduce reliance on US infrastructure. They know this war won't be won on the beaches of Taiwan, it'll be won in the systems we can't see. And for Taiwan, it's trapped in the middle, a tiny island that holds the key to the future, while being watched by giants armed with satellites, submarines, and semiconductors. It's no longer just about national identity, it's about global destiny. And so the final question becomes, is this collision inevitable? Or is there still a path, however narrow, that avoids catastrophe? In diplomatic circles, they call it strategic stability, the delicate balancing act where threats are managed, red lines are respected, and peace is maintained, not through friendship, but through fear of the alternative. For decades, Taiwan existed within that balance, but now, with every new warship, every missile test, every cybersecurity breach, that balance is faltering. And here's the terrifying truth: none of the key players want war. Not the US, not China, not Taiwan, but their incentives, insecurities, and ambitions are converging fast. Xi Jinping has tied his political legacy to the idea of national rejuvenation, and Taiwan is portrayed as the final piece of that vision. To delay too long, especially past 2027, risks internal doubt and a shifting global landscape that may no longer favor China's rise. Meanwhile, the US is under mounting pressure to defend democracy, project power, and protect its technological interests. For Washington, backing down could invite challenges not just in Asia, but from Moscow, Tehran, and Pyongyang. One retreat invites many advances, and Taiwan, it walks a tightrope. Too much alignment with the US and it provokes Beijing. Too little and it risks isolation. Its new leadership must now navigate a path where every decision, every policy, every purchase could be seen as an escalation. The result is a geopolitical paradox. Everyone fears conflict, yet every move makes it more likely. The countdown to 2027 isn't about a calendar. It's about capability. It's about perception. And it's about the narrowing window in which diplomacy can still outrun war. There are still off-ramps. Back-channel diplomacy continues. Trade remains a tether. And both sides know that a war over Taiwan would not be quick, clean, or containable. It would be economic suicide. It would reshape supply chains for decades. It would redraw global alliances, possibly shatter them. And it would set a precedent that the next global superpower gains territory not through peace, but by force. In a world this interconnected, invasion is no longer a local event. It's a global signal. which is why Taiwan has become the most dangerous flashpoint of our time. Not because it's doomed to war, but because so many people believe war is still impossible. The most dangerous wars aren't the ones that start with an explosion. They're the ones that build quietly, decision by decision, policy by policy, until one day there's no off-ramp left. Taiwan isn't just a dot on the map anymore. It's the most contested strip of land on Earth, an island smaller than Ireland, holding the fate of global trade, the future of artificial intelligence, and the fragile balance between two superpowers who no longer trust each other. 2027 isn't just a date, it's a signal, a moment where preparation meets pressure, where a $1 trillion supply chain meets 100 years of political obsession, where one wrong move could ignite a conflict the world cannot contain. And while missiles may be the weapon, semiconductors are the motive. Power is the prize, and time is running out. Because when control of the future is at stake, even peace has a deadline. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Most never look this deep, but at Empire Secrets we do more than report. We reveal the forces shaping your future. The power, the money, the truth beneath the surface. So if you want to understand what's really moving the world, not what's said but what's done, subscribe now, because this isn't just a documentary. It's your front row seat to the game of empires. Your desire, your empire.